She was a brilliant event planner trying to escape a painful past, until she walked into the wrong room and came face to face with the man who once shattered her heart. Julia thought she had buried all feelings for Ethan, her ex-husband, until fate trapped them together in an elevator, in a dance, and in the truth they could no longer avoid. Will she risk everything for a love that once broke her? Or is some pain too deep to forgive? Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful love stories that touch the soul. Julia Bennett stepped out of the black car, her heels clicking briskly against the marble pavement of the Crown Meridian Hotel, one of Manhattan's most iconic luxury landmarks. Her navy blue office dress hugged her form neatly, her dark brown hair pinned up in a sleek twist, but nothing about her calm appearance betrayed the storm of nerves churning beneath the surface. She clutched her iPad tightly, double-checking the presentation slides and detailed schedule for the International Unity Gala, the biggest event of the year for Elevate Events. This was her moment, her chance to rise, especially after her boss, Carol, entrusted her with leading such a high-profile production. CEOs, celebrities, politicians. It was going to be the event that either launched her career to the top or shattered it entirely. As she stepped into the grand lobby, the scent of white lilies mixed with a faint trail of sandalwood and polished wood. A crystal chandelier sparkled overhead like a sky full of stars, and soft piano music played somewhere in the background. Julia took a deep breath and approached the reception desk, where a young woman in a dark uniform greeted her with a polished smile. "Good morning. Do you have an appointment?" the receptionist asked, her fingers already flying across a tablet. "Yes, Julia Bennett from Elevate Events," Julia replied, her voice crisp but controlled. "I'm here to finalize preparations for tomorrow's gala. I was told the meeting room is on the 45th floor. The Sapphire Room?" The receptionist nodded, then frowned slightly at her screen. "There's been an update. It looks like the meeting was moved to the presidential suite on the same floor. I'll issue you a keycard for direct access." Julia hesitated. The presidential suite? That didn't sound like a casual meeting room switch, but with less than 20 minutes until her meeting, she didn't have time to question it. She thanked the receptionist, took the keycard, and made her way toward the elevator. The golden interior of the elevator gleamed under the soft lighting, and Julia caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. Calm, confident, composed. She repeated those three words like a mantra as the elevator climbed floor by floor. This wasn't her first high-pressure project, but something about this venue, this hotel, set her on edge. The doors slid open on the 45th floor, revealing a corridor lined with rich crimson carpet and abstract art in gilded frames. She walked toward the door labeled Presidential Suite, swiped her card, and stepped inside, only to come to an abrupt halt. There was no conference table, no rows of chairs, no projector screens or catering setups. Instead, the space unfolded into what looked like a luxury apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline, plush leather furniture, a fireplace flickering softly in one corner. And at the far end, seated at a walnut desk, was a man she never thought she'd see again. Ethan Cross. Julia froze. Her grip tightened around the iPad and her breath hitched. He was exactly as she remembered, broad shoulders clad in a tailored navy suit, raven black hair swept neatly to the side, his face still impossibly handsome and composed. But it was his eyes, those piercing storm blue eyes, that made her heart stutter and her stomach twist. He hadn't seen her yet, speaking into his laptop in a tone that was cool and commanding. "I need those financial projections by Friday, non-negotiable," he said, then clicked off the call. His gaze lifted and landed on her. Time stilled. "Julia?" he said, her name a slow burn in the air, his voice laced with both disbelief and something sharper, almost dangerous. "You're in the wrong room." Her voice caught in her throat. They told me the meeting was here. I didn't know." Ethan stood, tall and confident, walking toward her like a shadow taking shape. "This is my private suite, but maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe fate's finally gotten tired of our silence." Julia's pulse hammered in her ears. She hadn't seen him since the day she walked out of their marriage 3 years ago, leaving behind nothing but a note and her ring. And now, the man who once chose ambition over her was standing here again, just feet away, as if time had never passed. She took a step back, but the door behind her remained shut. She had a job to do. But already, she knew this project was going to be more than work. It was going to be a reckoning. The next morning, the clouds hung low over Manhattan, casting a silver haze across the city. Julia tried to ignore the tension in her chest as she entered the Crown Meridian once again, heels tapping steadily against the lobby's polished floors. Her team had arrived early, and the ballroom was nearly ready, but her mind wouldn't stop circling back to Ethan, his sudden presence, that sweet and the haunting way he'd looked at her. She hadn't planned on seeing him ever again, let alone working under the same roof. She pressed the elevator button with more force than necessary, willing herself to focus. Focus on the stage setup, the lighting cues, the guest list, not on the man whose voice still echoed in her head from the night before. The elevator chimed. She stepped in alone, pressing the button for the 45th floor. The doors began to close and then abruptly stopped. A large hand slid between the narrowing gap, and the doors opened again. Ethan. He stepped in like he owned the space, which in fact he did, and gave her a slow glance. He was dressed in a black shirt, sleeves casually rolled up, and charcoal trousers. His presence filled the elevator with quiet gravity. "Morning," he said, pressing the button again even though it was already lit. Julia offered a nod, staying silent. The doors closed, the elevator began its ascent, and then suddenly, everything went dark. A jolt. The elevator lurched, throwing Julia off balance. She stumbled, catching herself against the mirrored wall as the lights flickered once, then vanished. The cabin ground to a halt mid-rise. A loud hum came from above, then silence. "Great," she muttered, tapping her phone. No signal. She hit the emergency button, no response. Ethan's voice broke the stillness. "Backup systems should kick in. Just give it a second." "A second?" she shot back, irritated. "This is exactly what I needed today." He didn't respond immediately. She could hear him shifting beside her, then the soft thud of him lowering himself to the floor. "You can pace if it helps," he said calmly, "but it won't change anything. Come sit." "I'm fine standing." "You're not," he said gently. "And you hate enclosed spaces. You used to say elevators made you feel like the walls were breathing." Julia froze. The fact that he remembered that small detail, something she barely mentioned, hit her harder than she expected. With a sigh, she slowly lowered herself down, making sure to keep a few feet of space between them. The dim glow from her phone's flashlight bounced across his face. He looked impossibly composed, leaning back against the wall, his arms resting on his knees. "So," she said dryly, "do you get stuck in elevators often, or am I just cursed?" "Only with you, apparently," Ethan replied. "Though I'm not complaining." Julia exhaled sharply, turning her gaze toward the metal doors. "This is ridiculous. We shouldn't even be having this conversation." "You're right," he said, "but we are." She stayed quiet for a moment, listening to the faint rattle of the storm outside. Rain battered the hotel's exterior like a warning. Then he asked, his voice softer now, "Why did you disappear, Julia? After the divorce, you didn't just leave me. You vanished, changed numbers, moved, cut everyone off." Julia's jaw clenched. "What did you expect? I needed space, time. You buried yourself in work and left me behind. I begged you to see me, to fight for us, and you didn't." "I did," he said, his tone edged with pain. "You just didn't know. I went to our apartment. You were gone. I called your friends. They wouldn't say a word. I even hired someone to find you." "Why?" she whispered, heart pounding. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." Ethan replied, "Every day, I kept hoping I'd see you again, that maybe I'd get a second chance." She shook her head. "You only remember when it's convenient, when your life slows down. You always said later. Later we'd take that trip, later we'd have dinner, later you'd come home before midnight. But later never came." The silence thickened. Then after a long pause, Ethan said, "I was a fool." She looked at him, truly looked at him. His eyes weren't just intense, they were full of regret. The elevator jerked back to life. Lights flickered on, the motor kicked in, humming low. As they ascended the final few floors, Julia stood, brushing dust from her skirt. Ethan rose too, watching her. When the doors finally opened, she stepped out without a word. But her heart was no longer calm. It was a storm of its own, and Ethan Cross was right in the center of it. The rain had passed, but the storm inside Julia hadn't. The day after the elevator incident, she buried herself in work. determined to keep every emotion under control. She spent the morning adjusting table placements, coordinating floral deliveries, and reviewing last-minute audio checks. Every time she glanced toward the ballroom entrance, her stomach tightened, half expecting Ethan to walk in with that infuriating calm he carried like armor. She told herself not to care, not to notice how he looked at her, or the way her pulse raced when he did. But it was getting harder to pretend. By noon, Julia ducked into the hotel's cafe for a much-needed caffeine break. She ordered her usual hot latte, no sugar, and took a breath while waiting in line. Her iPad was in hand, her focus on the upcoming gala schedule, her mind ticking through every last logistical detail. When her name was called, she turned too quickly, not seeing the person right behind her until it was too late. The cup tilted, warm coffee splashed forward, and soaked the crisp white shirt of the man she collided with. "Oh no," Julia gasped, fumbling for tissues from her purse. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking." "I noticed," came the voice, smooth, deep, familiar. Her eyes met Ethan's, and her breath caught. Of course. Of all the people in the hotel lobby, it had to be him. He stood still, one hand checking the stain, the other raising an eyebrow, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Well," he said, his tone half teasing, "if you wanted my attention, there were easier ways." She flushed. "Don't flatter yourself, it was an accident." "Clearly." He leaned in slightly. "You've always had impeccable aim." Julia bristled, pushing the tissue packet into his hand. "Here, for the shirt." Ethan didn't take it. "Don't worry, I'll charge it to your company account," he said with a smirk. "Or better yet, you can apologize properly. Say at our 2 p.m. meeting?" She narrowed her eyes. "I'll apologize for the coffee? That's all?" He chuckled, stepping aside with theatrical grace, and nodded. "We'll see." Hours later, Julia walked into the sapphire meeting room with her iPad clutched tightly to her side and a knot in her stomach she couldn't untangle. The room was already half filled. Ethan was there, speaking with a few technical staff, sleeves rolled up, gesturing toward the screen setup. She entered quietly, intending to go unnoticed, but at that exact moment, one of the technicians dropped a microphone. The resulting screech pierced the air, and Julia jumped, stumbling backward and knocking over a nearby paper cup. The contents, black coffee, spilled across the polished floor and splattered the hem of Ethan's trousers. He turned. Their eyes locked. "Seriously?" he said, deadpan. "Are you keeping a tally today?" Her cheeks flushed. "That wasn't mine, I swear." "Still," he said, crossing his arms, "you do seem determined to sabotage my wardrobe." A few chuckles broke out from the tech team. Julia forced a smile, masking her embarrassment. "I'm here to check the final lighting cues," she said briskly, turning her attention to the stage. "Lead the way," Ethan replied. But he didn't just observe, he followed. Closely, too closely. As she walked through the room pointing out adjustments, checking color temperatures and stage angles, she could feel his eyes on her, studying her with a focus that made her skin prickle. It was unnerving, and worse, it wasn't unwelcome. By the time they finished, Julia stood near the stage, reviewing the checklist. Ethan ordered a coffee from one of the assistants. When it arrived, he took a sip and said, almost casually, "Still black. No sugar." She looked up confused. "You used to say that made my personality even more boring," he added, voice low. Julia's chest tightened. She remembered. Lazy Sunday mornings. Her teasing words while curled beside him on the kitchen floor. She swallowed hard. "I don't remember saying that." "You do." He watched her, eyes unreadable. "So what else do you remember about me?" The question hit deeper than she expected. Her fingers tightened around the tablet. She could have said nothing, could have walked away. But instead, she answered with a voice that trembled despite herself. "Nothing worth remembering." Ethan's jaw flexed, his eyes flashing something raw before he turned away, masking it with a quiet nod. "We'll see how long you keep telling yourself that." As he walked off, Julia stood still, the scent of his cologne lingering, her heart tangled in truths she wasn't ready to admit. The gala in New York had gone off like a dream, at least on paper. Julia had received a glowing email from Carol that morning, filled with praise from partners and guests alike. Still, she couldn't bring herself to celebrate. The memory of that dance with Ethan lingered in her mind like the echo of a song she couldn't silence. The way he'd held her waist, the warmth in his voice when he whispered that she was more beautiful than ever, it had been too real, too dangerous. She told herself it was just a moment, nothing more. But moments like that had the power to split hearts wide open. That afternoon, while finalizing the post-event report, Carol messaged her to retrieve a signed contract Ethan had prepared for one of their key investors. Julia hesitated. The idea of stepping into Ethan's office again made her chest tighten. But this was work, strictly professional. She walked down the 45th floor hallway, heels tapping softly against the floor. The corridor was quiet. She knocked, waited, and when no one answered, gently turned the handle. It was unlocked. The room was dimly lit, the late afternoon sunlight slanting across Ethan's desk in golden beams. She stepped inside and headed for the cabinet beside his desk where she suspected the document might be. As she opened a drawer, her elbow accidentally knocked over a small wooden box. It fell to the floor and popped open with a soft crack. Julia gasped, bending down to gather its contents. At first, she saw only slips of paper, then a pair of movie tickets, faded and creased. Their first date, a miniature wedding photo of her and Ethan smiling beneath an arch of white flowers. And then, tucked in the bottom corner, an unopened envelope. Her name written in Ethan's handwriting. Heart pounding, Julia stared at it. She shouldn't read it. It wasn't hers anymore. But her fingers moved on their own, tearing the envelope open. The letter was brief, but every word struck deep. Julia, I don't know how to fix what I broke. I wasn't the man you needed. I let work drown the best part of my life, you. The moment you walked away, I realized I'd already lost you long before. I've hated myself every day since. If I ever find the courage to hand you this letter, it means I still love you. If you're reading it, it means I never stopped. Tears blurred the ink before she could finish. Her knees gave slightly, and she leaned against the desk for balance, clutching the letter like it held all the weight of the past. The door opened. She looked up, startled. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, his eyes locking on the letter in her hands. For a second, neither of them moved. You read it, he said quietly. I didn't mean to, she whispered, hastily wiping her tears. It fell. The box. It's okay, he said, stepping forward slowly. I never meant for you to see it that way, but I never threw it out either. I guess I hoped, somehow. Why didn't you send it, Ethan? Her voice cracked. Why didn't you fight for me? He stopped just a foot away, his expression raw. Because I was a coward. I thought I had time. I thought if I gave you space, maybe you'd come back on your own. But you didn't, and I had no one to blame but myself. Julia stared at him, her heart breaking all over again. I waited, Ethan. I waited for you to show up, to call, to say something, anything. But you didn't, and I thought that meant you'd moved on. I never did. His voice was steady but low, heavy with truth. I never could. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the polished CEO everyone admired, but the man she had once loved deeply. The man who'd made mistakes, yes, but who stood before her now with nothing but sincerity in his eyes. I don't know if I can trust you again, she said, her voice trembling. I'll prove it, Ethan said without hesitation. In every way. I won't ask you to believe me today, but let me show you. Julia didn't respond. She couldn't. Her heart was a mess of fear and longing. But as she left the office, the letter still clutched in her hand. She knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't sure if she could ever love Ethan Cross again. But she wasn't sure she wanted to stop either. 1 week had passed since Julia found the letter in Ethan's office, and yet the words still played in her mind like a melody she couldn't forget. She had returned to her quiet apartment in Queens, kept her distance, and focused solely on wrapping up the gala series reports. But nothing, neither spreadsheets nor deadlines, could distract her from the truth she now struggled to ignore. The man she had once loved still loved her, and perhaps, despite all the fear and doubt, she had never truly stopped loving him either. It was late morning when she received the email, a calendar invite from Ethan. Subject line, Final Contract Signing, Julia Sweet. Her stomach flipped as she reread it. Julia Sweet? She blinked, unsure if it was a typo or some new manipulation, but curiosity pushed her forward. Dressed in a soft pearl-colored dress and wearing the sapphire necklace she once vowed to hide away forever, Julia walked into the Crown Meridian lobby. The soft golden light filtering through the glass ceiling reminded her of that first day, the scent of lilies, the hush of piano music, and her determination to remain untouched by her past. But today, her footsteps were slower. Not hesitant, just open. The receptionist, smiling as if holding back a secret, handed her a keycard and said, "Mr. Cross is waiting in the Julia Suite, 45th floor." Julia stepped into the elevator, the number lighting up like a signal from fate. The ride felt endless, her heartbeat tapping louder than the soft music overhead. When the doors opened, she stepped into the hallway and paused before the door, now bearing a polished gold plaque engraved with Julia Suite. Her breath caught. She swiped the keycard and pushed open the door. The room inside had changed completely. Gone was the corporate minimalism. In its place, white lilies arranged elegantly around the room, soft cream curtains catching the breeze from the windows, and on the far wall, an abstract painting she instantly recognized, hers. A piece she painted in their early marriage, long forgotten, now proudly displayed in the suite's heart. The scent of lavender and sandalwood filled the air, the same perfume she used to wear, blending into the atmosphere like a memory made real. Her hand flew to her mouth. "What is this?" she whispered, stepping further in, overwhelmed. From behind, a voice answered, low and unmistakably his. "It's your space. Your story. I wanted you to know that you were never just a chapter. You were the whole book." Julia turned slowly. Ethan stood in the doorway, wearing a crisp white shirt and dark slacks, his tie tucked in his pocket, as if even he couldn't bear anything formal in this moment. His blue eyes were open, vulnerable, steady. "I spent the last month redesigning it," he continued. "I didn't know you'd be here again, but I hoped." Julia shook her head slightly, tears rising. "You didn't have to do all this." "I did," he replied gently, stepping closer, "because I had to show you, really show you, that I'm not the same man who let you go." Her heart twisted. "Ethan, this is beautiful and terrifying." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath hitched. Slowly, he opened it. Inside, gleaming under the soft light, was the wedding ring she had once left on their kitchen table. Untouched, unchanged. "I don't expect anything today," he said quietly. "Not forgiveness, not answers, but I'm asking you, please, don't close the door we just started to open again. Give us a chance to rewrite this, to start again." Her lips parted. The tears came fast now. She looked around the room at every detail he'd remembered, every piece of her he had held on to even when she was gone. Her past, her pain, and now, maybe, her hope. "I don't know if I'm ready," she whispered, "but I'm not running anymore." Ethan took her hand, held it gently. "Then that's enough." A few days later, Julia returned to the suite once more, this time greeted by familiar faces. Carol, her closest friends, and a few members of the Elevate team. The room had been softly lit with golden string lights. A string quartet played the waltz from their gala night. And at the center of it all, Ethan waited, the velvet box in hand. He knelt, looked up at her with everything in his eyes. "Julia," he said, voice rich with emotion, "I was a fool to lose you once. I won't lose you again. Will you be my wife, this time for real and for good?" Her eyes filled, her heart full. "Yes," she breathed, "I will." As cheers rang out and Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, Julia kissed him under the lights of the suite built in her name. It wasn't perfect. It was better. It was theirs. Life often gives us second chances, but only if we have the courage to face the past and the humility to change. Julia and Ethan's story is a powerful reminder that love, while beautiful, is not immune to neglect. It requires presence, effort, and vulnerability. Ethan lost Julia not because he stopped loving her, but because he failed to show it when it mattered most. And Julia walked away not because she didn't care, but because she refused to remain invisible in someone else's life. Their journey back to each other wasn't easy. It was filled with pain, silence, miscommunication, and fear. But through honesty, reflection, and a willingness to grow, they discovered that healing is possible, and love, when truly nurtured, can be reborn stronger than before. This story teaches us that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and moving forward doesn't mean erasing the past. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships are the ones that break and are rebuilt, brick by brick, with intention and care. And maybe, just maybe, the people meant for us will always find their way back, if we let them. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop a comment below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss another meaningful story like this. Your support means the world to us.